welcome to the Bend Don't Break podcast. I am Aaron Schweitzer, your host, along with the region's omniscient reporter, Laurel Bronze. This podcast is powered by The Source Weekly, Bend's locally owned newspaper. And our podcast is generally supported by Worthy Brewing, putting education first, utilizing green technologies, and experimenting daily to brew the best stand beer in the Pacific Northwest while treading as lightly on the earth as possible. Living out their mantra, Earth first, beer second. Our guest today is Kevney Dugan, born and raised in Michigan, studied psychology and business at Hope College in Michigan, got into trail running, mountain biking, and fly fishing at a young age, and these are still his favorite outdoor activities today. Has worked in the fly fishing industry in Livingston, Montana, San Jose, California, Jackson, Wyoming. Prior to Visit Bend, worked at Orvis, a fly fishing and lifestyle company. His main interest outside of work is spending time with his wife and two adorable children. Kevney, thanks for joining us.
You bet. Good to see you guys.
Well, I hear your name all the time, whether it's at city council or community discussions. So how does it feel to be the man of the hour these days?
You know, it's interesting. I don't mind being man of the hour, but during these times and under these conversations, it's a little trying, but yeah. We're good. It's an honor to be in this position, and I'm happy to be serving this role right now.
Tell me a little bit how you became interested in working in the tourism industry. What was I see your background is clearly outdoors. How'd you get to the tourism side?
Yeah, it was not by intent. So the background is I moved here with my now wife and was working at Orvis, and at the time, she was actually teaching one of Doug LaPlaca's kids, who was the prior CEO here at Visit Bend. And just through that relationship, we started having conversations. And when I departed Orvis, we sort of brainstormed a sales job here at Visit Bend. And that was now over 10 years ago that I joined Visit Bend. So it was not by intent. It was more by chance. But at the same time, I've always loved the idea of travel and camping and outdoor recreation. And so it's turned out to be a great fit.
Well, you've been a very level-headed face for the organization through these times, so I'm sure your board's got to be happy about that. What are you hearing right now? I mean, you're in that position that everybody talks about. Your organization is supposed to bring tourists here, but there's a mandate to keep everybody safe, which has come to imply not having tourists here. But at the same time, businesses are crying for those tourism dollars. How does someone in your position navigate all that?
Yeah, I think as you just outlined, it's a little bit of a rock and a hard place. But, we sort of set out early. When we saw a lot of this coming down, we very quickly pulled down paid advertising and really wanted to make sure we understood what the public health crisis was all about and how it was going to play out. And I think we've been very cautious, and I think we've been very community first. I think we've stepped up for the stakeholders when we had conversations about what the guidelines should be in those various sectors. So I think in a lot of ways, we balanced the role of supporting our stakeholders while also adhering to the guidance that's coming down from city council. It's not a beautiful scenario right now. There's no way to candy coat that, but I think we have to continue to manage this public health crisis and also think about the economy. And if you talk to most of the stakeholders, specifically in the lodging industry, they're being very thoughtful. But at the end of the day, they know they have employees at home not going to work, struggling to put food on the table. And so this public health crisis is having multiple impacts and is a very delicate balance and a fine line to walk.
Yeah, we had a conversation with one of the state economists, David Runberg, and he was talking about what a large percentage of our economy is tourism. And, I can still remember back to post-recession, it was the tourism industry that pulled us out of that. It wasn't the housing industry. It was, people coming here and enjoying themselves. How do you see that playing out these days? That pro tourists, keep them back. Speak to that a bit.
Yeah, so I think it's not the same scenario as 2010 from the standpoint that back then we were largely a housing industry and tourism industry, and we didn't have the same diversity we have today. I think the work that's happened over the last 10 years, which Visit Bend's been a part of, the outbound marketing positioning this place as an idyllic place, has led to the relocation of many in the professional services sector. So we're much more diverse today. How do we get out of this one? We're not there yet. It's not time to go out there, in my opinion, and aggressively market and tell everybody possible to come here. It's time to sort of play it safe, and hopefully people are making the right decisions. And we are seeing some people travel, and under phase 2, that was an acceptable behavior. We've taken a step back from that. But I have full confidence we're going to get to a point where we get this public health issue under control, and we are once able again to be proactive in this space. And I think we will do our part to get these people back to work. And when that time comes, we'll know. And in the meantime, we're going to do everything we can to accept the business we can, and hope that we don't see too many businesses go out of business. But time will tell. This is an evolving situation, as we all know.
I heard Travel Oregon presentation where they taught, you guys are traditionally referred to as DMOs, Destination Marketing Organizations, but I was really caught by, in the Travel Oregon presentation, they were saying it's evolving more to DMO, meaning Destination Travel Management, where you guys are responsible for what happens to these folks when they get here. A bigger responsibility to the community as a whole, kind of goes beyond just like bring them here and let God sort them out. Now that person's you. So do you think that's going to be the case? It seems like that's what we've definitely moved to now, but in the future, I can see that sticking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was when I took this job 4 years ago, that was one of my goals, was to figure out a way to start thinking about the impact of this industry on our community, not just from an economic development standpoint. Sustainability talks about the social impacts, it talks about the environmental impacts, and it talks about the economic impacts. And I think in some ways, the tourism industry has not always been there for some of the social and environmental impacts. And I think when we started creating programs like the Bend Pledge, or now Pledge for the Wild, which is 15 communities strong throughout the West, these were programs to start talking about responsible recreation, being more thoughtful about those environmental places, but also the social impacts on a community. And if you're going to visit a community, what are those expectations? I think there's more we can do. And I think this is one of the topics that we are having a lot internally is what does a sustainable destination look like for this community, and whose role is that? We can't forget the fact that at the end of the day, the city of Bend retains 70% of transient room tax. Do they have a role in creating a sustainable destination? What is Visit Bend's role? Are we supposed to be sustainable in all those 3 sectors on our own? Or is our role to be the economic development engine, and the city's role to be dealing with facilities and infrastructure, and on the social side, public health and police and public services? There's some big questions that have to be asked, but we can't forget about the 70% that is going to the city from these transient room tax collections. And I think it's sometimes a group like Visit Bend is unfairly burdened with the full responsibility of destination management.
Oh, I think you're supposed to do it all. I expect you to be developing a police and fire department any day now. Laurel, did you have a question you want to fire over? Because then I'm going to get into tourists, and we'll be swimming in deep waters.
Yeah.
Well, sure. I guess along those lines, I think you made a really good point there, Kevney, about that 70-30 split. But is there any wiggle room? You started the Cultural Tourism Fund, I felt like, as, one of those things that really enriches the community, but also brings in overnight guests. Are there other things we could be doing, using that marketing money for things other than direct marketing?
Again, the thing we have to remember, even with the Cultural Tourism Fund, it is still tied to outbound marketing. So if Bend Film receives those dollars, one of the expectations is that they go into the Portland market and encourage people from Portland to come over the hill and go to Bend Film. So the same transient room tax laws that the dollars that Visit Bend is investing in more traditional marketing are still having to be upheld by those cultural organizations. So they don't get a departure from transient room tax law. So to answer your question, this is a state level dialogue. And I think one of the things that makes this very dynamic is that although in the city of Bend, that split is 70-30 with promotion of tourism getting 30, you have places like Lincoln City where it might be 55% to the promotion of tourism. The numbers are different across the board, and different communities are at different levels of their tourism curve. So, I think one of the big concerns the local population have is a lack of control over that decision. It's not just a city of Bend decision. These are agreements that were made back in 2003 between then city council and the industry, and it had to adhere to state law. So again, I think a lot of people show up and say, well, where is the latitude? And I think we're trying to find the edges. The Bend Cultural Tourism Fund is a great example of that. I think trying to create programs like, again, the Bend Pledge and Pledge for the Wild and working with local nonprofits in the environmental spaces are ways of looking at the edges to work within those guidelines and those laws.
Kevney, one of the byproducts of a lot of the discussions around tourism, and I know this is somewhat fear-based and a lot of things is, we've talked about this, how the term tourist can from time to time start to become a real negative thing. When, I was talking about this with Laurel, I don't know who these people are that don't travel or feel like they can, say these negative things about tourists other than the purists who never leave their house. Like, even if I go to Redmond, I don't live there. I mean, essentially I'm a tourist when I go to Redmond. I love to be a tourist there, but I'm just wondering what you're seeing with regard to the way tourists are being portrayed.
Yeah, I think, I would say this is the part that's taken the biggest emotional toll on me in the last few weeks. I get the broad dialogue around managing this health crisis, and I get that there are decisions that need to be made to keep this community healthy. But the way in which we have turned that word into a curse word and sort of given the green light to the community to take their own action has been frustrating. And I don't think the dialogue coming out of elected officials and our leaders is appropriate. And I think it's one of the things we talk about a lot at even the national level, that we sit around and complain about, and then we do the same in our own communities. And I think there's a level of decency that we owe to each other, and let's have that dialogue. But putting stickers on cars about go home, or we saw the Downtown Bend Business Association with a reclaim your downtown ad. It's hitting a point that it's untenable, and it's not fair. And this industry at times has been so much to this community, whether pulling it out of the recession or simply creating jobs. I mean, just at a basic level, to then see us sort of to get to this level, it's beneath us as a community. And I think that's been the hardest part through all this. It's one thing to manage a public health crisis. It's another thing to point blame and see the actions we're currently seeing in our community.
Yeah, I've always been somewhat surprised given, and I know the tourism industry, I mean, we've diversified some, but as we've diversified, we've also grown in terms of the number of tourists that we're managing on a yearly basis. But we have to acknowledge that there's somewhere between 17 and 20% of our livelihoods are composed of people coming here and enjoying themselves. And, again, I'll point to that Travel Oregon presentation that I heard, where these are the people that end up moving here. They're not people that came here and went home. They're people who came here, enjoyed themselves, decided to get a summer home, evolved into a regular home. And so is that a Visit Bend task, or how does one elevate the discussion about how we're treating tourists, treating each other, treating our economy?
Yeah, again, it's a it's a big question that we have to answer, and it's one that we are ready to undertake. And I think that if we as a community are ready to have that holistic conversation about, the full piece of the pie and what is Visibend's role within that, how do we ensure that long-term 10, 15, 20 years down the road, this destination, this community has the same values, has the same recreational assets, has the same elements that we've all moved here for and learned to love and enjoy. And I think that's going to take a roadmap that allows a Visibend to start talking about facilities or start talking about other ways to invest these dollars. The general notion and the way the system is currently built is that the more we go out and drive transient room tax collections, that 30% still grows in total dollars, right? So it's sort of a self-perpetuating situation. And I think taking a hard look about how we can reinvest those dollars is really good. But again, I'll go back to one of the things I would like to see is that with the city 70%, that's also part of the conversation, and that not that they have to do anything different, but as a community, we start to recognize that. We read the definition of partnership the other day, and that is that both partners accept both the liability and the profit. And I would argue, and again, this is me getting a little defensive, that a lot of that liability has fallen on us. And we sort of forget as a community that there's a full 70%, or we're on track to put it, close to $8 million in their general fund, is not part of that conversation. And you're hearing the police force talk about, a lack of jobs or jobs going away or being underfunded. And it all rolls up. We're all part of this ecosystem, and we're all doing our best to be successful and vibrant. But I think we have work to do, and we're ready to undertake that work.
I think, I can't remember what the particular name of one of these posts that went up, but if you remember, it was maybe a year and a half, 2 years back, someone put on their blog where there was a bunch of trash in the river. What was the name of that? I mean, help me out.
Are we promoting ourselves to death or selling? Are we selling them to death?
Loving to death.
Loving ourselves to death. But what caught my eye about it, and I think we editorialized about it at the time, was that there was in fact all this garbage. Now, whether that was tourists or whether that was locals, but there was no agency to claim responsibility for it. And I remember there was a group of people that just came about through social media to go and clean it up. But the whole time I was like, which agency is going to step up? Was it the city? Was it parks, which was the two I was looking at, and going to assign a task force to this kind of thing? Because we clearly are, like you said, benefiting quite noticeably with regard to the amount we get from tourism. But where is that other group? Not the marketing organization, and that's why I brought up the manager thing, but where's that other thing that goes out there and handles them, so that we do feel good about it, and and the locals get cut to the front of the line. If there's no organization there, how do we get around? So
yeah, I remember that. I think I was a month on the job when the tourism came out by City Club, and it was done mostly because of loving Ben to death and that blog post. But yeah, it's something that we sort of say, there are jurisdictions, whether it's the BLM, Forest Service, the City of Bend, Parks and Rec, and we don't have any jurisdiction to set policy or do those things, but we are more than willing to prop up when the Forest Service puts a fire ban in place or to help where we can. But I think it's an interesting question of what is that group shaping the future, and how the increase in both our local population and the increase in tourism and people arriving here for visits, what does that management look like? And, we're starting to see it in places like the Whitewater Park, where you have an incredible amount of people floating the river. And how do we collectively come together to make sure that stays a viable experience and a healthy experience for the river and for the people in the river? It's one of the things that I can't wrap my head around, but I come from the Midwest, and I go back to the Midwest, and there hasn't been an ounce of growth from the town I'm in, and it's just sort of been status quo. And I come back here and the incredible amount of vibrancy and health and fun and smiles and all the things are here. But with that comes sort of an unknown out in front of us. And I think that unknown is sort of something we have yet to grapple with or really sort of define. Where are we going and what does that look like?
Well, bringing up the tourism, because I remember how ludicrous I thought the whole premise was, because it was, should we be promoting tourism? Should we be encouraging people to come here, or should we be turning them away? And I've always maintained, until you're going to take a gigantic God eraser to the mountains, they're coming, and marketing it and making sure they have a great experience when they get here kind of is an obligation if you're taking their money when they arrive. So I think if we're all successful, then we'll just have responsibility creep for you. And again, Kevney, you'll have a fire department and a police department for tourists. It'll be some kind of badge that has a tourist police on it or something. But all kidding aside, like, I still have not seen where that kind of management comes from. And it's clearly not from, you have a very small staff. They're very focused. They're marketing folks. And I'm just curious to see. I do agree that it's the first step would be, let's change the way we address people. We see that across the country, a recognition of the other and trying to get a handle on how we treat the other. And tourism falls right in there. I think it's one of those things we can do a better job of. So, well, Kevney, we are running out of time here. Anything that we didn't touch on that you would like to speak to before we break away?
No, I think we covered all the main topics. As you guys heard, we are proud to be a partner of this community and proud to do the work we do. And we know it's a contentious issue, but we're here to listen and get better every day. And support our stakeholders and also, work with council and other elected officials to make sure that we're doing work that their constituents are asking for. And we'll continue to show up at that table. So we look forward to more.
That's great. I have something I'm going to drop by your office. My son is taking photography in college, and he's been going through these old Life magazines, and he pulled this ad out from the San Francisco Tourist Bureau from 1944, and it was a "Don't come to San Francisco" ad, and it was all about all the sailors and Army people shipping out and how it was just a big party and they couldn't take any more people. And I thought, oh, Kevney will appreciate this ad. So yeah, different times. Kevney, thanks for your time. This is the Bend Don't Break podcast. I appreciate you taking time to be with us, and good luck.
Yeah, thank you.